Now, one of the segments I absolutely love, because I love speaking to these RP data guys, and Cameron Cusher is joining us on the phone. Good afternoon, Cameron.
G'day, Anthony. How are you?
Great, mate. I haven't spoken to you since before I was away, so it'll be 7 or 8 months ago.
Yeah, it's been a long time. It certainly has.
A hell of a lot's happened in that time. Tell me, Cameron, just give us a rundown of what's happening internationally, nationally, statewide, and in Adelaide.
Well, internationally to start with, it's a bit of a mess. What we're hearing coming out of Europe and the US at the moment, the US housing market certainly isn't looking too pretty at the moment. I won't touch too much on that. I think most people are aware of what's happening there. On a national basis, the market's really starting to slow quite a bit. So over the year to July, property values across the combined capital cities are down by 2.9%, and during the months they were down by 0.6%. What we're finding, though, is that units are outperforming houses. Now, this isn't a trend we're seeing in Adelaide, but across the combined capital cities over the year, values for units were down 0.5% compared to 3.7% fall across the housing market.
That's incredible. Okay.
And then very briefly in Adelaide, values over the year are down 4.5%. They're down 1.1% over the month of July. And over the year to date, they've actually fallen by 3.6%. So a lot of that decline has come during 2011. And as I said, houses in Adelaide are actually recording a superior level of, you can't call it growth, they've both fallen, but are holding up stronger than units. So house values are down 3.9% over the year compared to a 6.8% fall in unit values. So very briefly, the market's fairly soft to July. And it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out when we get into spring, if we see a bit of an increase in activity or not.
Cameron, what's the time on market and the average discount that's coming through in your stats?
Yeah, so at the moment, houses are taking an average of 53 days to sell, units 50 days to sell. At the same time last year, you were looking at 44 days for a house and 38 days for a unit. So certainly the length of time is increasing, and it is important to note that that's only across the stock that actually is selling. That stuff that's not selling is obviously sitting on the market for quite a bit longer. And then if we look at time on market, vendor discounting rather, you're looking at 6.9% discount for houses, 6.8% for units, and then at the same time last year it was 5.3% for houses and 5.8% for units. So again, the amount of discounting taking place is having to increase, and I guess that's a symptom of a slowing market, and vendors need to adjust their prices accordingly.
Tell me, what's the story with, you've got the time on market, we've got spring coming up. What's your prediction as the impact of the normal spring load, the amount of stock that normally comes on at this time of the year?
Well, as you said, we do normally see a big uplift in stock. I think at the moment, though, when we have a look at the listings data, there's still elevated levels, the number of properties advertised for sale across all of Australia, but also in Adelaide. So if we have a look across Adelaide, total listings at the moment are about 34.5% higher than they were at the same time last year. So,
sorry, what was that? Repeat that number again, Cameron.
34.5% higher than they were at the same time last year. That's for the week ending the 4th of September.
That is very substantial.
There's a lot of stock available on the market. It's not really new listings which is driving up activity, actually. New listings are about 11% lower than they were at the same time last year. So it's really that, the fact that properties aren't moving quickly. A lot of properties are still being advertised. There's just not a lot of buyers in the market at the moment, that the stock levels are really mounting. Now, if we start to get an uplift in new listings like we tend to do during spring, that just means that there's more and more stock on the market at a time when buyers aren't very active. So it's probably not a good thing to say to the real estate agents out there, but it's probably not necessarily a great thing if we get a huge amount of new listings hitting the market in spring, because there is already such a high amount of stock out there.
Cameron, I've been quoted in the paper correctly saying that we've got a two-speed real estate market in South Australia. Have you got any comment on where the action is? Is it, I have my own view, but what are your thoughts on where the action is and where it's kind of the softest?
Our data's showing that it's actually the premium sector of the market that's slowing the most, and that's happening right across all capital cities. So over the year, the top 20% of of suburbs nationwide is down about 5.5% to 6%. And you compare that to the middle market and the lower end of the market. Both of those have recorded falls of less than 3%. Now, I think there's probably some decent buying in the premium market at the moment. I just don't know if there's a sense of urgency from buyers to go and get into the market. I think if there's going to be much in the way of activity, it's going to be in that middle market. So it's not going to be the dirt cheap stuff, and it's not going to be the really expensive stuff. It'll probably be the middle to higher middle sector of the market that's performing strongest.
Cameron, my anecdotal activity from our own sales, we represent sort of 10%, say, of the market, is at the very top end. In our case, you're basically 1.5 to 2 million plus is very strong. And we had a sale 17% over, in the high 3 to 4 million last Friday. That's only one example. We had off-market sales, high level, but then the bit between that, which is contrary to what you've just said, from 500 to about 1.5, we found really tough going.
Okay, well that's interesting. We'll have to keep an eye on it and see how it all pans out. As I said though, there probably is some decent buying in that premium market at the moment because it has come off quite a bit in some instances. I guess it's just getting those people in a position to make a decision when there's so much stock to choose from out there at the moment. But
Cameron,
sounds like you guys are doing all right.
Yeah, we are. What's the lag time though? That might be what this is about. So if you
that's right. This started to July, and obviously we're at September now, so conditions may have changed a little bit during August.
Right. So you need to have the property settle, then that becomes a statistic, doesn't it?
That's exactly right.
So yes, basically, we're 5 to 6 months behind the actual contract or the auction.
In some instances, yes. The South Australian Valuer General is actually quite quick at getting us the data. So South Australia data does tend to be a lot more timely than most of the other states. But as you said, this data is looking at July and we're now in September. So there might have been a bit of a change in the market over the last month and a half.
Cameron, can you give us any idea of the volume of transactions, the number of sales that are happening, what the changes have been in South Australia?
Yeah, sure. So sales volumes are still relatively buoyant compared to a lot of other areas across the country. Sales volumes nationally are down about 17% below the 5-year average. In Adelaide, it's not as severe. Sales volumes are about 11% lower than the 5-year average. So that's a trend we're seeing everywhere, but certainly the Adelaide volumes are holding up much better than we're seeing in a lot of other states. For good examples, areas like Hobart and Brisbane, where sales volumes are more than 30% below the 5-year average.
Cameron, that's been fantastic. I've gone nearly twice the time that I was allowed and I've been getting the wind up, but that information is gold. Thank you so much for coming on.
No problem at all, Anthony. I'll speak to you later.
Okay, all the best. Now let's go to SA's Finest.